All right, today, talking about low-hanging fruit, at least in the CrossFit sphere. Kurt, whenever I say low-hanging fruit, what do you perceive me as talking about?
Low-hanging fruit. Do you want to go like the... I don't know. Brief me.
I'm pretty much talking about what can we easily make gains in? Where can we easily find ways to improve your performance as opposed to other, venues that we could visit? Last week you discussed somebody with a 450-pound back squat, getting them to a 470 would be, I don't want to call it a nightmare, but in the sense
not
that
a
we're talking,
fruit.
It would not be a low-hanging fruit. You'd have to get a ladder and climb the tree to pick that fruit.
Yeah, so you really just have to look at weaknesses and see where the gaps are, and that's usually where you can make a bunch of gains. So in the CrossFit sphere, like you said, we put our athletes into gymnastics pretty much last week. Gymnastics, strength, and more like machine endurance. But I would say look at their weaknesses, see where the gaps are the biggest, and then you kind of find that low-hanging fruit, and that's what you're going to see where you're going to easily make a lot of gains. That's like athlete right now that I've been working with a lot was Chelsea Sievers, and she had the big gap in gymnastics. So at first, like, you start climbing and it's like, oh, I got butterfly. Oh, now I'm stringing this amount together. And then, as you said, now we're at a point where that gap is not as low hanging. Now it's like, all right, well, now you're only getting 2 more reps every, so like in the strength aspect. So it was a low hanging fruit, and then now it's not a low hanging fruit, which is fine, but you just have to progressively work through that. So I'd say if you kind of just dial in their weaknesses, you're going to find out what low hanging fruit it is for the certain athlete and where you're going to really make those big gains at first.
And for her, what method did you use to discern that was her low-hanging fruit? I mean, obviously, it's probably a visual thing. You just noticed watching her in certain workouts that's your low-hanging fruit. But if we had an athlete competing in a more formal competitive environment, how would you go about saying, oh, those gymnastics are what are really holding you back?
CrossFit makes it a little bit easy in that sense. Like we can look at the open results. All right, this workout you placed super well, and it had lifting, not any super high skill gymnastics, and then you get to the gymnastics, and they're like, all right, you placed 500th. So you can kind of dial it in. CrossFit makes it a little bit easy in that aspect. Depending on how the workouts are laid out, there's always sometimes maybe something's laid out and there's 3 different things in it, so you couldn't truly tell if you didn't actually watch them. But then when we do assessments, it's easy to tell too, because I like to go through, if I don't know their true weaknesses right off the bat, I just give them like, all right, you're gonna do this conditioning piece, you're gonna do 10 minutes max cals on an echo bike, you're gonna do max amount of strict handstand push-ups, you're going to do max amount of bar muscle-ups, and this, so you can kind of do the little tests too when we do little assessments.
Yeah, so there are those good single modality tests that we run just to see where your standpoint is with your strict pressing, your gymnastics of this, that, pulling, pressing, calories in the bike, like you said, that's a good aerobic test. A lot of people look for you're looking for your body weight in calories over a 10-minute window. Yeah. I was looking for how to phrase that.
Yeah, that's good. You made me hurt my feelings. I said that hurt my feelings when I did that 10 cal test. I think I was like 12 calories off from my body weight.
That's not bad.
Not bad, but I was like,
and you weren't exactly in shape at that point in time. If you were in shape, you'd probably be over your body weight in calories.
I would hope. Haven't been
so
in shape in a
that
while.
means away from your conditioned state, you wouldn't have had to do any extra work to get yourself into better aerobic conditioning because you would have focused elsewhere.
Very true.
But the other thing about CrossFit is whenever we step into more competitive environments, the test isn't always going to be 10 minutes max calorie echo bike or 50 handstand push-ups for time. It's going to be an amalgamation of movements, different time windows, things like that. And we're going to have to look at how can we take results from those events and turn that into a way we look at their training priorities. So you talked about taking results from the open or from quarterfinals or things like that. So there's an example of somebody that I ran a little bit of analysis on. I forget when it was. It was probably in September or October. It might have been even a little bit later than that, but I think that's about when it was. And we say, okay, we have a baseline of familiarity with this athlete. We essentially know, or at least have a loose understanding of what their weaknesses are just based on watching them, based on working with them for however long. And then you go and you look at how did you perform in this sequence of open workouts, this sequence of quarterfinals workouts, and we say, okay, where did you finish relative to the pack? Now, there's a little bit of arbitrariness to whenever we say, what's our cutoff for what's the lower hanging fruit, and then what's the higher hanging fruit? What's a strength and what's a weakness? Or at least what's a weakness and what's something that you can kind of maintain for now while we focus on other things.
Yeah.
So in the open, say you finished top 8% in the first workout, top 11% in the second workout, and say this is back when they're like 4 or 5 workouts.
Yeah.
Third workout, you were top 6%, and then the fourth workout, you were at the 18th.
Cool.
Yeah. And that fourth workout, you were at like the 18th% mark. That outlier is the 18%.
Yeah.
So we're saying, oh, okay, so that's an indicator of what might be a weakness. Now, that workout might be a 15-minute AMRAP of something with a heavy barbell, something with some sort of gymnastics, and then double unders or something like that. For example, there was an old 20-minute workout. It was 2 thrusters, 4 toes to bar. And do you remember that one? I can't remember exactly what it was. It was dumbbell thrusters, it was toes to bar, and it was double unders.
I don't think I remember that one.
But it was weird because it really didn't have any sort of heavy weight stimulus, but it had it lasted long enough to where aerobic conditioning was going to be
a big play,
a factor. But then at the same time, like, how do you navigate dumbbells? Like, does your toe to bar capacity eventually come into play because it was only sets of 4 or something like that? So it was a volume versus density.
Or did you just not have double unders?
It could have been that. If that's the case, then we can. That's its own thing to approach. Yeah,
that one's an easier fix, though, too, for the most part.
But yeah, you start looking at these workouts that have different layouts, and you're like, how do we extract the low-hanging fruit based on your performance in that workout? And then if you go to quarterfinals, the field changes a little bit because you're not looking at hundreds of thousands of people you're comparing yourself to. Yeah. So for this athlete, it was like, oh, we finished in the 18th percentile for this first workout, but it turns out that's actually a decent score in the quarterfinals. Whenever in the open, you'd be struggling to make your next stage.
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
So 5 quarterfinals workouts. 3 of your workouts ranged between finishing in the 30 to 40th percentile, and then that last 2 are like 60th percentile. And you're like, oh, okay, these are really showing where you're struggling.
Yeah.
Because all of these athletes who made the cut are now kind of really lapping you.
Yeah.
They're really pushing past you. Now you're in the bottom half of your field
amongst the
people that you want to compete with and beat.
Yep.
So we can look at one of those workouts and say they had the recurring theme you find is, oh, there is some sort of inversion. There's a handstand walk.
Yep.
There's a handstand push-up. Boom. You grab that. You pick it out.
Yeah.
But then there might be other workouts where, say you have an athlete who finished in that quarterfinals in like the 10th percentile for some sort of barbell lift because they're strong. But then you look at another Metcon that had a heavy barbell in it, but it was in a more aerobic context, and they struggled in that one. That was one of their outliers in terms of poor performance. So now we're not looking at, oh, we need to get you stronger. It's not necessarily that. It's we need to get you used to lifting a heavy barbell under high aerobic duress. So there's a lot of nuance when it comes time to saying what's the actual stimulus that we're looking to improve your ability to function within. Whenever we look at these competitive environments, because it's always not going to be, oh, you're doing a 10 minutes max calorie echo. You're doing 50 handstand push-ups for time. You're doing 30 ring muscle-ups for time. Those are good tests, but whenever you place those things into an aerobic environment, the test becomes a little bit different, and we have a different idea of how to approach what your weaknesses are.
Yeah. And that's what's great about CrossFit. That's what I've always liked about it, is that it's just there's so many things going on. So I like that you're trying to get everything. You're not really great at anything, but you're good at everything. And that's what CrossFit takes from all sports and kind of makes it into its own. And yeah, but it makes it hard when it comes to dialing in your weaknesses. And a lot of it comes to having that strength endurance with those certain movements. But yeah, I totally agree. It's fun to kind of dial in an athlete and look into and really find out what their weaknesses are, instead of just looking at like, oh, we have these specific tests. It's like, all right, but that's like, I mean, I was a decent example. Was the Fittest of the Coast workout. We did, you had like a short burst workout, and then you had the barbell lift, and I'm decently strong, but boy, did I get buried. It's all right. I don't have that endurance of lifting that heavy barbell. So I'd be a low-hanging fruit for me is lifting a heavy barbell while actually fatigued.
Yeah. And there was also something to say about the fatigue coming from the previous event that we did.
Yeah.
Because it buried you. It buried me a little bit. We were in rough shape after that. And then you have to turn around in an hour, roughly,
Yep.
and go and do a very twitchy workout in that Fran-esque workout that we did, straight into accumulation of clean and jerks at 245.
Yep.
And it's a little bit hard to recover from that first workout in about an hour to go and do something like that.
Yeah.
So maybe there's something even to be said about just total work volume across those two workouts. Could there be something improved there?
Yeah.
So we can look at the small picture, that whether it be an individual movement with an individual workout, or we can look at the medium picture, if you want to call it, the workout itself, or the big picture is how did you survive workout to workout in your competition?
Yeah, that's a really cool way to look at it. Is like there is three different, and there's just so many variables going on, and like you said, like that's me. I'm a one workout right now, and that's it. Like I can't hang on to much more. And then there's athletes like you said, like, and it could be even like a time domain thing. Like you don't even look at it's like, all right, well they excelled in the 4-minute AMRAP, they're getting buried in the 10, but they're still decent at the 20. It's like, so they can't hold a high intensity pace. They're good at holding a lower intensity pace for a long time, and they're good at sprinting. They cannot hold a 12-minute pace for X amount of time. So like you also have your just time domains where it might not be a strength or a skill thing. It could just be what their aerobic capacity is exactly. So there's a lot of cool pictures to look at in CrossFit.
Yeah, and if you find that you struggle in that 12-ish minute time domain, what you can do is you take the results from whatever event you recently completed that had that time domain in it, or if you just know that that's the case and you want a new test, you can come up with any test that you want, really.
Yeah.
There's like the sky is the limit for what kind of test you could come up with, as long as you hit that right aerobic stimulus within that time frame.
Yep.
And then what you do from there is you can create intervals out of that.
Yeah, I was just going to say, interval, that's where I think a lot of CrossFit lacks too, is me and you make probably a lot of interval and EMOM type style stuff. And it's just like, oh, I need to get better at this. And then they probably look at it and they just hammer, I'm bad at 12-minute workouts. All right, 12-minute AMRAP. All right, 12-minute AMRAP. All right, 12-minute AMRAP. It's like, no. Dial it back. Like, get your low-hanging fruit. This is what you're bad at. All right, now let's make this a smart way to approach it. Let's get into interval training. So you're getting the right stimulus, rest, and then get back into it. If you're just hammering 12-minute workouts, you're just going to destroy yourself.
Yeah, and that 12-minute workout, it's a pretty intense time frame. The work performed in that time frame is intensive, and the whole point of training it is to make the work extensive.
Yep.
So we're trying to draw that work out and get you used to performing what would probably be a higher volume than you're seeing in that 12-minute window, and sustaining a heart rate that you'd see in that 12-minute window, but a little bit longer time. You're holding it a little bit longer while incorporating rest in there, so you have successful exposures to that heart rate, to that feeling that you're going to have in that workout, repeated over and over and over. There was a workout that I ran for myself because I was coming off of a little mesocycle where I was doing very little cardio, and I was like, okay, I need to reintroduce some cardio as I start moving into my competitive season. So on one day I was like, okay, let's target the 20-minute time domain for aerobic stimulus, and I'm like, okay, that'll be my test that I'll base intervals off of. And the next day it was what did I do? It was like a 6 to 9 minute window, and the day after that it was a 12 to 14 minute window. So if we're talking about that 12-minute window, the test I ran, it was 3 rounds for time, 500-meter row, 30 toes to bar, 100-foot handstand walk. I figured it was a decent combination of movements, and it also had that 500-meter row, which what's the phrase I want to use? That 500-meter row where the point was to jack your heart rate up. The point was to kind of push that more intensely than you would a 1,000-meter row, because I was deliberating, do I want this to be 500 or do I want it to be 1,000? If it's 1,000, I'm going to kind of sandbag it, not necessarily sandbag it, but I'm going to move a little bit more slowly to pace myself.
Exactly. Your heart rate's not going to get where you want it to.
Yeah. The 500, I'm like, I can come out and pull like a 145 and then see if I can hold on to that through the rounds and from movement to movement.
Yeah.
And then I figured the toes to bar, you're looking at 90 to 120 reps in any workout normally. Yep. So I'm like, okay, boom, 90 reps, that's the volume we're hitting. Yeah. And then handstand walk, same thing, 300 feet. Yeah. So that workout took me 13, I want to say. Yeah. And then what I did from there is I said, okay, now I can break this into two things. I can break this into toes to bar and handstand walk intervals, and I can break this into rowing intervals. Yep. So now what my session looks like that's tailored toward that workout. every 2 or so minutes, I'm doing 15 toes to bar and a 50-foot handstand walk, because based on my performance in the workout, I took my splits.
Yep.
And it's like, on average, the 30 toes to bar and the 100-foot handstand walk took me 2 minutes and 42 seconds. So that means 15 of each would take me 121. Yep. And if I want to practice a faster pace than that, I'm squeezing that into a 1 minute window, and then I'm resting 1 minute before I do that again.
Yeah.
And I'm doing 8 sets of that, or at least that's what I did last week. And that adds up to a little bit higher volume.
400 feet.
400 feet, and then 8 times 15, that's 120 toes to bar. So you're looking at roughly, 1.25 of the volume that you did in the workout itself.
Which is perfect.
And from there, you can either condense your windows, practice those paces with less rest, or you can add more volume to that.
Yeah.
And then after that, I recovered. I do whatever intra-workout fuel that you do, and then you hit your rowing intervals.
Yep.
And you're resting adequately between those intervals. In the past, we've made the mistake of not resting enough because, the harder, the better. No, the better you hold on to your paces, the better.
Yeah, we've made that mistake I made it for probably 2 years, at least 2 to 3 years.
Same here,
and just like, all right, 500-meter row, 30, 45 seconds of rest, back at it.
And it was...
It's like, dude, you started at 147, you finished at 154?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
And the point was, or at least our mindset thinking about it was, let's see if we can hold on to the pace instead of going in there knowing, at least for those first 300 meters we can hold on, and then maybe those last 200, it's okay, let's grit our teeth and go. Mm-hmm. Yeah. But yeah, so I had those intervals with the toes to bar and the handstand walk and the row. Instead of doing 12 500s, there were 3 500s in the workout, so I did 6 of them here.
Right.
And I rested 2 minutes between them, and I was trying to hold a pace slightly faster than my average pace in the workout. Yeah. So we're taking that 12-minute window workout, or what could be any workout that you make within whatever time window, and we're just using that as a basis for how we're structuring our training afterward.
Yep. How many rounds did you do? It was every 2 minutes. Was it every 2 minutes?
Yeah, it was every 2 minutes. I was doing 15 toes to bar and a 50-foot handstand walk. It was taking me about 50 to 52 seconds, which is a little bit faster than I was wanting it. But I was like, the rest I'm feeling good.
Yeah,
I started off closer to that 1 minute mark, and then as the rounds progressed, I kind of picked it up a little bit. I can hang on this
a little better. Yeah, I mean, that's everything. With everything, it's like, all right, you game planned it. We went a little faster. It's like, all right, well, next week I know I went a little faster here. Now I can either, like you said, add volume or maybe lessen the rest a little bit to hit a little bit more of the stimulus you wanted.
Yeah, if the point was to work to rest 1-to-1. Since I was working for about 50 seconds, you would cut your rest in half. Or not in half, what I say, in half. Down 10 seconds.
Down to, yeah.
But the only thing about that is, like, I'm looking at the clock. I'm like, what kind of math do I have
That's
to do
the hard. That's
clock?
Always the hard part. It's like, I actually just want to make this easy for the athlete. Like, as an individual, it's a little easier if you're like, all right, well, I'll just struggle with this math. But then when we're programming for somebody, I'm like, I'm not going to do that. Like, because I think about rest 1-to-1 on rowing intervals a lot. Just give them 2 minutes.
Yeah, if you're pulling 151, you rest a minute and 51 seconds.
Yeah, exactly. They're just gonna be like, dude, no.
2 minutes.
Like, yeah.
That's what I did for me. I was like, well, I'm pulling like a 142, but I'm gonna rest 2 minutes.
I'm gonna rest 2 minutes to make this easy. I'm gonna be able to hold on to this pace. It's like that 18 seconds isn't gonna really make that big of a difference. I mean, small one, but to your mental side, it helps way more.
Yeah, if you're already fatigued and your brain's doing backflips in your head while you're pulling whatever on the rower, you don't need to be doing like, 18 seconds from the 2 minute mark, that's a 142 rest. No, that's going to drive you crazy. Or you're just going to say, screw this. I'm like,
exactly.
You'll resort to the 2 minutes anyway.
Exactly. You're going to resort to the 2 minutes regardless. So might as well make you not feel bad about yourself and being like, it's just 2 minutes regardless.
And while we're on the topic, I think we can also talk about successful exposures to those race paces too. Because when I was pulling those 142s, even with a 2 minute rest, after 3 of those intervals, I was like, man, I'm kind of dying right now.
Yeah.
So I made that third rest, or the midpoint, 4 minutes instead of 2, because I don't think it's beneficial to be holding, or at least like killing yourself to try to hold a pace and fail to do it anyway, because that rest wasn't enough at the midpoint. Yeah. So I rested a little bit extra at the midpoint.
Pretty much just waste. If you did that and you didn't take the rest, you pretty much just put all that energy into that workout for nothing.
Yeah.
And now your recovery is just worse too. It's like you didn't hit the stimulus that we were trying to hit, and now you just buried yourself. You're not going to be able to rest and do another one. Like, so it's just going down. I tell my athletes that a lot, especially when we're doing like sprinting intervals. I'm like, talk to me. I need you to, if you're tired, don't sprint. Like I tell Andrew that all the time. He'll run one. I'm like, all right, how do you feel? I said, ideally we go in 3 minutes. I said, when that 3 minutes comes, you let me know. And there's times where he's like, I'm ready. And there's times where he's like, no, I need at least another minute. And that's fine. That's fine. Because if this isn't at the power output we need it, I don't want to do it.
Yeah, and if you are doing something that requires a quicker turnaround, like if you're sprinting like that, I know for Andrew, because he's playing baseball, there's no real time, like there's no time pressure for him to turn around and sprint again. Yes. Relative, like if it was football, it'd be a little bit different,
yes.
Depending on the position too. Mm-hmm. But even in CrossFit, whenever you were like, oh, I'm rowing at whatever pace, I have no choice to get back on that rower in, call it 2 or 3 minutes whenever I finish the other work.
Yep.
So if you're finding that you struggle to recover in a certain window, instead of the variable you're changing week to week being the pace that you're pushing, make it how much time you're resting between sets. But you got to take note of how long you're resting in that first week or in those first couple weeks. Get an idea of how long you need to recover for that next interval, and that's the variable that we're looking to adjust going into that next training session.
Yeah, exactly. That's being the more of the aerobically challenged person is like, all right, they're just not recovering well, so we have to ideally lower their rest each time, and that's where you're getting that more aerobic. But like you said, on the power output side, it's like the opposite.
Yeah. So, how fast can you keep moving? Now it just depends how long of an interval you're going for.
Yeah,
because 500 meters is, depending on the person, 90 to 120 seconds. That's for the guy at least. And
what would you say, just from a volume standpoint, is the appropriate 500 meters? Like if you're doing intervals, I know you did
how much
6.
Total volume?
Yeah, you did six sets.
It depends
so you were
on
3,000 meters. Yeah. But would you say typically the amount of meters that shows up in CrossFit? Like I think a lot of times we do way too many meters compared to what you're actually gonna see. So like we train, like the way you're doing it right now is perfect in my opinion, because I don't think you really ever see much more than 3,000 meters.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of my logic in laying out these aerobic tests that I was talking about, because there was one workout I did when I was trying to kind of fall around the 10-minute mark for conditioning, and I did 5 rounds of 24 cal echo, 8 ring muscle ups. And sure, I could have done a 10-minute echo test, or I could have done 30 ring muscle ups for time, but how often do each of those things show up in a CrossFit competition? I mean, sure, the 30 ring muscle ups for time showed up at the CrossFit Games a while ago. I'm not going to be doing the CrossFit Games this summer. And it showed up one time. That's what I'm saying. It showed up one time. And usually those movements show up within the context of other things. So I'm like, why not test it in that way?
Yep.
Then when I got my time from that, I found out where I kind of not fell apart, but had to start re-navigating my ring muscle ups, what my pace was on the Echo bike, and I used those as a basis for intervals in later training sessions.
Yeah.
Now, whenever we talk about, like you said, your rowing, how often does 10,000 meters of rowing show up? Because that's a lot of I mean, I think that's excessive for a training session. But whenever we would do 10 intervals of 500, how often do 5,000 meters show up? You might see a 5K row, maybe. I don't think anybody would program that because of how boring it is essentially to watch.
Yeah. That's another topic I'm like on an anti-machine kick right now.
Yeah.
In the CrossFit space, but
you want to say that for, I don't know, if we have some time later, we could talk about that.
Yeah, we'll dive into that.
But, no, yeah, whenever we would run HWPO in the past, and it would have us run 10 500s.
Yep.
And you're like, how often does 10,000 or 5,000 meters show up in a CrossFit workout? But not even 10 or 5,000, 2,500. Because usually when you're running intervals, you're doing roughly double the volume. And that can change depending on the person, depending on the layout.
Yep.
Double the volume of what your test was.
Yep.
So like I did those 3 500s in that aerobic test that I talked about. That's why I was doing intervals with 6 sets in it when I was talking about those rowing intervals previously. But we're doing those 10 500s for HWPO. How often does 2,500 meters of rowing show up in a workout?
So usually if you have 1,000 meter row, it might show up twice in a workout. So that's on the high end, you're at 2,000. So that'd be 4,000 in the training. And for 500, that'd be 5 rounds. To hit your 5K, that's 5 rounds with a 500 meter row. You said, how often do you see that?
It would be
rare.
In the open in an AMRAP.
Yep.
Yeah. Otherwise, if you're in an in-person competition...
And then just the elite people are hitting it because they got that far.
If you are at an in-person competition, they likely won't have you doing an event that takes that long because it's not going to just have rowing. So you're going to have 2,500 meters of rowing, and that's call that 10 minutes
It's
roughly,
10 minutes easy,
including
like for your especially if you're at a local or even a higher level competition.
but including transitions and things like that, and that's probably half, if not a third, of the workout.
Yep.
An in-person competition with so many things to shuffle through, heats and divisions, aren't going to be having you do a 20 to 30 minute workout.
Exactly.
Or at least more than once.
Yeah, I
You know
mean, we
what
just
That
did
might be a
one.
one-time
The
thing.
highest one was, and it still took long.
Yeah.
It was 16 minutes, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was, I
Two
mean,
8
divided in
minutes,
half between pairs
Yeah.
because it was a 4-person team.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. So I agree with that. Is just the volume that we train at a lot of the times is probably way off
Yeah.
compared to what we should actually be training at.
And when the volume's that high, you're training to survive it instead of training to thrive within it.
Yep.
Yeah, so there's something to be said about reducing that volume so that it better matches what you'd expect to see in a competition. But then at the same time, if you have, I don't know, somebody who wants to improve their 5K row, you would still do that. But then
Yep.
their intervals would be 8 to 12,000 meters of intervals, which
Yep.
we'll see in 90 minutes when you're done rowing.
Yeah.
But
Have a great day.
But at the same time, you're looking to adequately rest between those intervals. Now, it's going to be more aerobic than it's going to be lactic, so
Yeah.
you can rest a little bit less than that 1-to-1 we were just talking about.
Mhm.
But, yeah, like I said, it depends on what metric you're looking to improve, and then you base your intervals off of that. If you're solely looking at CrossFit, that totality of distance you're looking at least in the test, isn't going to be as much as we're probably used to doing.
Yeah.
So those 10 rounds of 500 meters we were doing in the past, sure, I think they had some effect on us because we were just
Sure.
younger and they
Yeah.
were building an aerobic base.
Yeah, and that was a low-hanging fruit for me. So
Yeah.
I saw a benefit from that a ton. Like, my conditioning's always been the weaker side of it, so it was low-hanging fruit. You're going to get better at
Yeah.
it just by doing it, obviously. But could I have got better at it properly and not been as beat up for the next, like, I mean, we're doing, especially you're doing 2 sessions in a day.
Right.
It's like, I have to come back here after I just did a 5K at these insane paces, like trying to back squat after that or something like that. You're like, oh my gosh.
No, yeah, I mean, the way they would structure their sessions, I would try to sandwich both sessions into one, even though that has some detriment to your ability to adapt to things.
Time's tough.
But time is tough, yeah, so you got to try to fit in what you can. I would do my lifting, I would do those rowing intervals, and then I would say, boy, I don't know if I can do whatever's next.
Because technically it was typically lift, rowing interval, and then you had a Metcon-ish type thing,
Mhm.
and then probably something else, like some type of accessory, something. Yeah.
Usually my accessory fell to the wayside because I was like,
Yeah, exactly.
if you're looking at the video, I'm just sleeping there.
Yeah, that
But,
became accessory.
But doing the Metcon after the rowing intervals was probably a waste of time.
Yep.
Because I was just flopping around doing
total
things.
waste of time.
Yeah. And usually it was some sort of, in that sense, or at least the layout that I'm remembering was some sort of gymnastics capacity piece,
Yep.
which might have had something, but I mean, you just pull it on a rower for 30-ish minutes, and now you got to go pull your body weight
Yeah.
in a different plane, but you're still pulling, and your body's getting beat up if you're trying to sandwich those together.
Yeah.
So they wrote those in 2 sessions for a reason.
Yes.
But if you're a person who can't fit those 2 sessions, you have to reevaluate the layout of your training so that everything is useful.
Yes.
Nothing is being wasted.
Yep.
Now, to return to the topic of low-hanging fruit, you said that those rowing intervals attacked a low-hanging fruit for you. And even though it was suboptimal in its layout for you particularly,
Yeah.
you still saw benefits in that,
Yes.
which is what low-hanging fruit essentially means.
Yep.
So whenever we look at, say, a novice athlete, somebody who has very little experience in CrossFit or whatever sport they're focusing on, that whole sport is their low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
So they can pretty much do anything and find improvements.
Yep.
We were talking about high school athletes 2 weeks ago and how you can pretty much throw anything at them and they'll adapt. That's because they've seen so little.
Yes.
And they have very little exposure to whatever kind of stimulus you're throwing at them, so they will very quickly
Yep.
adapt to whatever you're throwing at them. Everything's a low-hanging fruit for them. So now whenever we look at a CrossFit athlete, say they come from an Olympic weightlifting background where they're already strong, that fruit is already very high-hanging because they've already tapped out a lot of their gains that they can find there. Their set point is already very high. When we say set point, we mean just your automatic performance level in a given venue. So if you come from marathon running, your long form aerobic endurance has a high set point because you've already trained that and you probably already have a genetic predisposition to being good in that field.
Yep.
Now, your lower hanging fruit is something that A, is your weakness that we were talking about, but B, something that you can attack
Yeah.
even suboptimally, but attacking it is going to have great improvements in your performance just because you have a lower set point, lower genetic predisposition to being good at it. So just doing it, A, consistently, and B, with the right layout is going to have great improvement almost automatically.
Yeah. Like you said, you could throw anything at those guys, but let's do it the right way, and then we're going to reduce the risk of injury by a tenfold. I mean, I don't care what sport you're playing. If you're training hard, you're always increasing that risk of injury. If you're being competitive, injury is not preventable. So, really, I think managing volume, and then obviously recovery, but I think managing volume is probably the biggest thing when it comes to managing that risk. Like I said, freak things happen all the time in sports, but managing just that load is probably the biggest thing coming at it. So, yeah, you have that low-hanging fruit, but we still don't want to do it poorly.
Right.
You're still going to see benefit, and that's kind of what stinks in this is, like, a lot of times you get coaches and they do just throw, like, oh, well, like with Chelsea, I could have just been like, all right, well, you're just going to do butterfly pull-ups, just flop around there. Like, she could have just flopped around for, every day and, like, gave her no drills or anything like that. By week 4, she's going to
figure something out.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your body's going to start connecting to something. She's going to be like, wow, Kurt, that was great. I was just doing like every 30 seconds, flop around and try to get
Flop
in.
around and try.
You know, it'd be like, she'd be like, oh, wow, I saw which she would have saw progress in 4 weeks, but her shoulders would have probably hated her.
Mm-hmm.
Like, she just loaded up that so poorly. And it just would have been and now her skills probably aren't developed the way you want it to be too, also. So now when that fruit starts getting higher and higher, we pretty much have to go back and go over foundation.
Yeah.
So now you're backtracking instead of just building that foundation properly from the start. All right, and then getting that fruit higher and higher.
That's actually a good topic to talk about, is what happens once that fruit starts to get higher.
Mm-hmm.
Because you have somebody like Matt Frazier, his low-hanging fruit is like, say this is the line of fruit hanging from his tree, his low-hanging fruit is like, boop.
Yeah, right.
And the rest of it, that low-hanging fruit is like, oh, you swam 2 seconds slower than you wanted to in whatever
Right.
event. So at that point, it's really getting nuanced about how you're analyzing your performances.
Yeah.
And at that point, we could probably have a whole separate discussion about something like that, but it's just going to come down to, instead of looking at it from a very zoomed out perspective, we're zooming in, and that way that 1 inch difference between your high fruit and your low fruit now looks like 8 inches because we're so far zoomed into it. Yeah.
I like that.
But with Chelsea is, if you were to suboptimally lay out that design for her and that fruit naturally just rose up to kind of match level everything else, and you talked about having to go, oh, well, we got to pluck this thing, replant it lower because that fruit, because you suboptimally, like, I don't know, watered it, nurtured it, however far we want to take this metaphor, it can't, now that it's higher, everything else can continue to grow, but it can't because of how it was planted. Almost poor, like, I don't say poorly, but poorly.
No, yeah, exactly. I'm going to have to start calling you Johnny Appleseed.
Johnny Appleseed. Yeah. All right.
It's your new nickname in the coaching realm.
Johnny Appleseed. Johnny Appleseed.
He plants the fruit well.
But no, like, I never attributed this kind of analogy to the way I approach my lifting lately, but my lifting has been my low-hanging fruit, but it couldn't seem to get much higher because I had some technical deficiencies in my clean pull, my snatch pull, and it was until you almost pull that higher. It wasn't high for me, but it was about as high as it could get based on my technique.
Yep.
We had to pull it back down, work on little things, moving weights that ultimately aren't challenging, but because they allow you to dial in your technique, you have to focus on them.
Yep.
By using those to dial in my technique, I could go ahead and resituate that fruit back where it was, and now it has the ability to keep rising higher.
Think about how far you've gained. I mean, how many years were you stagnant?
In my strength?
Yeah.
Not completely stagnant.
I mean, you're still going to see. I mean, also, you're still young. I know you don't like to think you're young, but I have 8 years on you. So it wasn't completely stagnant. But now think about the leaps and bounds you're making just with changing your technique and positioning.
And the crazy thing, too, is to think about my back squat. That has been stagnant for probably
there you go.
2 or 3 years.
Yep.
And I recently adjusted my technique, and even though I'm still moving lighter loads to get used to that technique, it feels like night and day compared to the old version.
Yeah.
Because the old version, I would sit down, I'm like, even though I can stand up with this, it kind of hurts my hip. I'm in a weird position. This isn't very comfortable, especially once it gets heavy.
Yep.
Now I've adjusted where I'm sitting the barbell on my back.
Yeah. where it's appropriate for you.
And boom, now I'm shooting in and out of the hole without thinking about it.
Yep.
And I know that once I start loading up with heavy weights again, it's going to feel a lot more manageable, and I expect to be able to move heavier loads, A, more consistently, and B, just heavier than I've been able to in the past. And
exactly.
the heavier you can squat, the better carryover it has to your Olympic lifts, and it's all self-propagating.
Yep. No, that's a great example, and especially from not only that you're now getting that strength and it's going to get even higher and higher. You said, I could feel it in my hips with this flopping. It's like now you're also reducing injury risk.
Right, yeah.
Like you went and brought it back down, and now you're reducing that injury risk because you're doing the right things. You figured it out when you're squatting. Somebody was just like, all right, put this on your back, sit down, stand it up. And your body was like, all right. And you adapted to it.
Yeah.
But it wasn't the greatest adaptation. And then as you get your fruit higher, now it's like, ooh, now we're riding an injury line because now this load is there's a lot for the positioning that I'm in at the bottom of that squat.
And there's something to be said about when I learned that squat technique too. I was 14, 15 years old, and not to say that I was squatting poorly then, but since then your body changes.
Yep.
That's an early time in your life.
Yeah.
Between the ages of 15 and even 20 for me, I probably grew a little bit every year from 15 to 20, and my body changed a little bit. My femurs got a little bit longer.
How short were you at 15 then?
15, I was probably like 5'2".
Woo!
Yeah.
You're a little rocket.
I know. I was also like 115 pounds. So
very
less
you were a bottle rocket.
Yeah. But between that age and now, like, who's to say the height that I've accrued, most of it wasn't in my femurs. And because of that changes your proportions, and you have to move differently, and that's something that I had never accounted for. So when we talk about low-hanging fruit, we assess your performance, but then within your performance, what do we assess about you as an individual? So you can see how much nuance that you can apply to this kind of discussion, and it really just comes down to how well can you base your training off of you as an individual.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the bottom line of everything.
Exactly. A good and I don't know, you're the tech guy, so I don't know if you can put that article that we read about your length of stuff. Like, that's something that if you're not getting coached, it's something that everyone should probably measure and just be like, oh, this is, if you want to get nerdy about it. But like you said, that pretty much article is a reason you changed your squat, because you're like, oh, this is the length of my femurs. Now I need this more mid-hybrid low bar position for this squat because it's going to help me be in the right position due to my body stature compared to, and like that's what people would think, like, you have long femurs. No offense, I'm really hitting on your height right now.
And we could talk about Leah. Her femurs are longer on her body than mine are on mine.
Exactly. And Leah's what, 5'1", 5'2"?
Yeah.
So like, even if you're short, you might have longer proportions somewhere. So dial it in for yourself. I mean, I'm not tall either. You look at my wingspan to height ratio. I'm lucky when it comes to the pressing movements a little bit, because I'm like 5'7" in my arms. It's like not a big difference, but still that little difference where I bet your wingspan's probably what, like 2 to 3 inches longer?
Yeah, my wingspan is like 2.5 inches longer than my height. Right?
Yeah, and that's where that it hurts you. I mean, you still dominate those workouts, but it compared to Frank.
Yeah.
I mean, just like that's what, if you really want to get nerdy about it, dial in your ratios there, and then that can also help you determine your low-hanging fruits.
Yeah.
And all that stuff.
The article talked about people with longer limbs relative to their torso are going to have an easier time pulling and a harder time squatting / pressing.
Yep.
And then vice versa if you have limbs that are short relative to your torso.
Yeah.
So if you're somebody who is predisposed to having a hard time squatting because you have long limbs, there's naturally right there, boom, low-hanging fruit.
Yep.
Something that you can go and grab and just start focusing on that, and you'll notice big improvements because you're genetically not predisposed to being good at it. So by working on it, you're going to help that catch up to your predisposition to being good at pulling.
Yeah, that's where that article just like dived it in. It's like, all right, well, you should actually probably work on pulling 2 times a week and stop working on squatting this much.
Because it's not going to do anything for you.
Exactly.
Yeah. You're going to be good at squatting no matter what.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. You are already genetically set up to be better at squatting than you are at pulling, so you need to focus on pulling.
Yeah, and since my limbs were longer, there was a period of time where didn't know that, but I was doing a lot of RDLs and Bulgarian split squats, And within 1 week of that, I'm like, oh, I'm already moving a lot of weight. This is pretty cool. But no, it's not cool because you probably didn't even have to be doing that in the first place because your body is already
just
predisposed to being good at it.
Yep.
Find other things to get better at.
Yeah. Exactly. Yeah, that's pretty good.
But that article is very detailed. It talks about not only the entire length of your leg and of your arm, but it's also how long is your femur, how long is your tibia, how long is your ulna in your arm. So it broke down those different ratios so you can get a pretty detailed look at how your body is laid out.
Yeah, that was one of the best articles I've read when it came to looking into the body type of in athletes, especially in this space too. I felt like it really hits home.
And I forget the website it came from, but I have the link and I can attach that to like the YouTube or the Spotify.
I have it somewhere saved.
Yeah.
You sent it to me.
With how much we're talking about it, we should probably shout it out like legitimately. So we'll link it.
We'll link it too. Yeah, exactly. We don't even know what it is, but shout out to Link.
Yeah. Alrighty. Do you have any final remarks?
Yeah, let's. I still haven't given up on the machine.
Right. Oh, you're still holding on to that.
I'm thinking about that the whole time.
Okay,
no, I don't know. It drives me nuts. I just think that, like you said, we talked about it and we're like, these are great training pieces. Like, these are great training tools.
Mm-hmm.
They are. Like, a rower is a great training tool. Echo bike, great training tool. But when you get to a sport and you get to a high competitive level, there's not one sport in the world other than CrossFit. Maybe somebody will probably think of one, but most of them, especially the bigger ones.
High rocks.
Yeah, dang it, another big one. But in its detriment, I think running takes where high rocks will shy away from that is running takes such. It's like you have to be a good runner. If you're not a good runner, in
the
high
ratio
rocks,
of running to machine work almost renders those machines moot.
And honestly, in CrossFit, it's the opposite.
Yeah.
Like the machine work.
Barely any running.
Exactly.
All sitting on the machines.
Yep. All sitting on the machine. So, in my opinion, like especially if there's no weight classes, because there's not in CrossFit, that you have to just be like, this physically is moving from A to B. And like we've talked about, sometimes the games does a pretty good job of that. Mm-hmm. Is, all right, well, they're not on bikes. They're on actual bikes. They're moving this bike and their body weight from A to B. They're running. I guess they probably haven't truly rowed yet. But I would think if you're going to row, get out on the water.
Yeah.
Like, I think that would be great. Because again, you have to move your body through it. You don't just get to sit there and put power through the machine at 250 pounds. You're just not, I don't know. Without a weight class, that's why there's weight classes in sports like Olympic lifting and powerlifting and stuff like that, just because of what you can produce with that weight and power from singly just being there.
And at the Olympics, you see the cyclists, they aren't riding an echo bike.
Yep, exactly.
They are actually, they're either on a track or they're doing their road route. Mm-hmm. They're not on the machines. They're moving bodies through space.
Yep. Yeah, so that's just my biggest thing on CrossFit is that you go to competitions and all this stuff, and it's just like, oh, what's your power output on a skier or a rower? Or it's like, no, like, it's not how you test who's the fittest, especially when you get into the body weight stuff. Now you start having classes, then I guess it would be more fair and a better test. Mm-hmm. But I like the sport that there is no weight class. I just think that the machines is just stupid to me. Like, I want to see people, and just from a visual aspect, I think is probably another, like, coincides with it, is like, I do not want to sit and watch somebody sit here and row or sit here. Like, you can't even see. Like, they did the echo bike. We did the echo bike test in the competition. My mom was like, I didn't know what was going on. Yeah. And it's like you watch the track workout that we did. Mm-hmm. It was like, that was exciting.
Tell who's winning?
Yeah. It's like, oh, you're trying to pass somebody.
Who's winning? Who has to catch who?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like that gets it exciting. As in, it's like, oh, well, some guy was just shouting out random times. You look tired. You look like you're moving just as fast as this other person. Meanwhile, we lost by 50 calories.
Right.
It's like, yeah, it looks like you guys did great. It's like, no, we actually got buried in that workout. Yeah. It's like, and that's not where, I guess, we got buried in it. And I'm like fired up about it. But in my opinion, I mean, we did actually bad in the running one too. So just overall, we did. But I would rather see more moving from A to B, and we still might get buried by the same people. But in my opinion, I just think that's bullcrap.
No. There's a gradient to how to approach programming those machines too. It's like, if you have a score that is entirely the accumulation of calories on a machine, we're getting into what you were talking about. There's problems there based on body size and just entertainment value. That machine doesn't move, so you're just sitting there, and how can you tell if Sarah and Jessica are competing with one another? Whenever, in actuality, one is 50 calories ahead of the other, despite them both looking to be working as hard as each other. But you could either get it completely away from those machines and say, okay, we're moving actual implements through space, whether it's a bike or a rower. I mean, those things get tougher depending on what other, like, you need a body of water.
Yeah.
If you're going to ski, do you need a mountain to ski down?
You're definitely...
But by pairing those machines with other things, the event is comprised of machine work and other things going on. It's all a collective score. Then you're kind of diluting the ineffectiveness of using that machine as a scoring system.
I agree. Yeah, there's definitely ways to dilute it, but I just think, I don't know, I think when you're just testing something, in my opinion, every other sport's had, it's moving your body through A to B, through space, or here's a weight class. So, in my opinion, it's like, all right, like for you and I, what we would have been in the one, I don't know, say just probably 80 weight class, and then be like, all right, what did we test against those people that hit the Echo bike compared to the guys that are 210? Like, they're just moving it. And like you said, I mean, it all even, and then you could have the comments of like, well, you guys have the benefit when you do muscle ups and handstand push-ups. It's like, yeah, but I'm moving my body. Like, it's the sport. There's no weight class. Like, I don't know. There's probably two-edged swords. I'll get some big guys coming at me like, well, we benefit here. It's
in
like,
that sense, Echo and muscle up. What was the workout at the Mayhem Classic?
Yeah,
you know
exactly. I mean? In that sense, then put them together at least. Yeah, I agree.
I think that's the best way to kind of...
Because how rare is it that it's just, like you said, it's just 30 muscle-ups for time? That ain't happening.
It happened one time at the games.
And again, and who benefited the most? Probably the small guy that weighed 160 pounds and was just like... with short limbs.
I think, Frazier did it unbroken.
Yeah.
But then you look at somebody like Fikowski, who's...
Oh, my gosh.
I don't want to say twice the length of Frazier, but he's long.
Yeah. And he probably got screwed there.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, at least dilute it and coincide it. Mix it up. I agree.
All right.
All right.
The end?
My little rant. Yeah, the end.
All right. Close the book.
Close the book.
Until next time.